Welcome again to Bloomrang Academy, where we are hosting an Ask Me Anything session with Zapier certified consultant Jessie Gilchrist. Jessie is a Zapier certified expert and Bloomrang integrations consultant at Sidekick Solutions. Sidekick Solutions is a Bloomrang partner specializing in system automations for Bloomrang, and they've been a Bloomrang user since 2013. And most recently, they were part of the Bloomrang team that launched the Bloomerang Zapier app. So we're in great hands today, and we're very excited to have Jessie here today to share her expertise and explore Bloomerang integrations with us. Welcome, Jessie.
Awesome. Thanks, Diana. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Well, thanks everyone for being here today. We're really excited to just have a platform where you can ask any of your automation or Zapier integration questions. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to dive on in. So I'm going to turn my webinar or my webcam off now that you've seen my face, so we can focus on the content. So this webinar is the last in a series that completed an incremental dive into Zapier integrations for Bloomrang. So if you were not able to attend our webinars over the last couple of months, we explored common automation opportunities for nonprofits, as well as some Zapier 101 and 201 concepts. And all of these recordings are available in Bloomrang's Academy or on its YouTube channel. And I think Diana is actually going to share the link to these in the chat. So our hope is that this AMA or this Ask Me Anything session kind of brings this webinar series full circle and really helps answer those questions so you can implement automations across your organization and attain outcomes that really drive you towards your mission and your goals. So today, our webinar is going to answer common questions from Bloomrang users and provide an opportunity for you to ask your automation questions. So we're going to cover a little bit of an intro of Zapier in case there's any of you joining new today that haven't attended the earlier webinars in the series. We're going to talk about when to pursue Zapier integrations, cover some frequently asked questions we get from Bloomrang integration users, and then cover the Q&A. So these will be questions that were submitted by you in advance of the webinar, as well as any that you're asking here in the Q&A during the webinar today as well. So feel free and enter your questions that you have in the Q&A, and we will get those answered. Either Jeff, my teammate, is on the call here, and he can answer those through the Q&A, or there may be some that we answer live on the call as well. So we want to start by doing a quick poll to see how many of you attended the earlier webinars in the series, whether you attended them live or you watch the recordings. And I think Diana is going to go ahead and launch a poll. So let us know if you attended or watched any of those prior webinars, just so we can get a sense of how much content you've attended for this webinar series.
Lovely. As you all are answering that, I put the links to the recording in the chat, but these are also linked in the slides which you will get after. So don't worry if you can't get to all of the links or copy all of the links today. Those will be included in the slides as well. And Jessie, it looks like we have 74% didn't attend or watch any of the prior webinars, 17% attended or watched a couple, but not all, and 13% attended or watched a previous webinar.
Okay, perfect. So for those of you that have attended some of the webinars, the next few slides are likely going to be a review for you. So I appreciate you bearing with us while we get through these, but we want to make sure everyone's up to speed and familiar with what Zapier is. So Zapier is automation software. It sits between your Bloomerang database and other apps you use, helping them talk to each other. And this can even come in the form of Bloomerang to Bloomerang automations to support operational tasks. So Bloomrang's Zapier app extends the power of your database by enabling integrations with over 5,000 other applications in Zapier's directory. And Zapier was designed for anyone to build an integration. So you don't need to be a developer or know any code to build an automation in Zapier's platform. Now, integrations are a key feature of your Bloomerang system. We really see that technology for nonprofits should follow this model where your CRM, such as Bloomerang, is your core app in your tech stack. So this is really what will allow you to take your fundraising efforts to the next level. Data should flow in and out of your Bloomerang database, connecting it to the other best-in-class tools that your organization uses. And by keeping Bloomrang as the central hub of your tech stack, you'll create a global record of constituent engagement with your organization and centralize your reporting. Now, when we talk about Bloomerang integrations, there are two types we should differentiate between: native and custom integrations using Zapier. So if you attended our webinar last month that explored Bloomerang automation opportunities, this is going to be a review for you. So native integrations are often called direct integrations, and these are built within your Bloomerang software. These are often the most user-friendly form of integration and offer a standardized templated sync of data between two systems. The other option for integration is to pursue custom integrations using Zapier. Zapier allows you to build integrations and custom workflows that align with your organization's use case. Now, again, some of our previous webinars, the 101 and 102 webinars, provide some great key concepts in Zapier and also provide you with some information on how Zapier can help you customize your workflows using the different utilities in that platform. Now, you may wonder, when should we pursue a Zapier integration instead of a native integration? So organizations pursue a custom Zapier integration when potentially no native integration exists. The native integration does not align with the organization's use case, or a higher level of customization is needed. Perhaps the desired functionality is not provided in the native integration. And also when you need to automate among multiple applications. So it's a good practice to explore native integrations first if one exists, and then pursue a Zapier integration if a native one doesn't exist or does not align with your use case. We're going to transition now by covering some frequently asked questions about Bloomerang automations in Zapier that may not have been covered by the earlier webinars in this series. The first one that we get a lot of the time is, how does the find constituent search work in the Bloomerang Zapier app? So this search requires first and last name if you're searching for an individual, or the organization name if searching for a company. In addition to that, we need at least one piece of contact information. So street address, phone, or email. And the search is looking for an exact match. So it's looking for that combination of the name matching and at least one piece of contact information matching. So what this means is that you may potentially get duplicates in Bloomerang if the data coming from your source system, say a fundraising app, has a different name than what your constituent has in Bloomerang. We often see this with the difference between a legal name and a preferred name. So John Smith versus Jonathan Smith would not match in the search, because John and Jonathan, and in the search is looking again for that exact match, is going to see those as different or separate constituents and potentially create a duplicate account in Bloomerang. So that is looking for that duplicate search, or sorry, that exact match when it's performing that search. And this is where Bloomerang's duplicate tool is going to come into play, because that provides more of a fuzzy match or a fuzzy search where it's looking for partial matches. And so utilizing Bloomerang's duplicate review tool in addition to your automation is a really important piece of managing your integration, because it will allow you to catch any of those instances where a duplicate was created. Again, most of the time we see that due to a first or last name being submitted differently from the source application to how you see it in Bloomerang. I want to go ahead and show you real quick what this looks like in Zapier on this Find Create Constituent step. And it looks like we do have a question here from one of our attendees about their automation with MailChimp is creating a lot of duplicates. And so we often see this question a lot when you're setting up your automation. If you're using only the create constituent action, it's going to create a constituent every time. So instead in your automation, you're going to want to use the find constituent search. And this search includes the option to create a constituent if one isn't found. So this pairs the search with the creation step. So instead of using just create constituent, we want to try and find the constituent first. And if an existing one is not found, then create a constituent. So you can see right up here, these are all of my search fields. And then in the box down here are all the data elements that I can map to for if an existing constituent is not found to create a new one. So this is really important. This search step is really important to ensure that your Zapier automations are not creating additional duplicates in your system. So it's trying to perform that search first. If you were to use just that create constituent, it will create a constituent every time and not perform a search. The next question we get pretty often is, will the update constituent action overwrite data in Bloomrang? And the answer is yes, or in some cases, yes. So the update constituent action overwrites data in standard and custom fields except address, phone, and email. For address, phone, and email, the data submitted, whether it's new or matches existing address, phone, or email data in Bloomrang, that information will be promoted as the primary data set. So the primary address, primary phone, or primary email. Any previous prior information or previous primary information will be demoted to secondary. So it doesn't get deleted. So for example, if I'm integrated with a fundraising app and through one of my online donation forms, I get a new email address for my donor. If I use the update constituent action in Bloomerang, that new email address will become the primary, and the existing or older email address will become a secondary email on that constituent's account. So again, for standard and custom fields, so that's going to be right here. Everything outside of our address fields will overwrite data in Bloomrang. So all of our name fields, all the other fields on our profile. Here we've got our address, phone, and email. Again, these are updates or promoting to primary. Whereas then down here, all of our custom fields, this would all overwrite existing data in Bloomrang. So it's important to note that when doing the update constituent action, that any field you map to is going to overwrite the existing data. Now, any fields you leave blank in this action, it's not going to delete data. It simply doesn't update those fields. So you'll only want to map to the fields in this action where you actually want to make an update. Users often wonder, how quickly does my does my automation in Zapier trigger? Now, this depends on your plan purchased in Zapier. They actually recently sped up the time in which a Zap will trigger. If you're on the free plan, which most Bloomerang users will be on a paid plan, but if you're on the free plan, typically it triggers within about 5 minutes. Most Bloomerang users are on the starter or professional plan, and these should trigger within about a minute or so. So Zapier recently updated these trigger or polling times. So you should see your data trigger and sync pretty quickly after that triggering event occurs. Can Zapier connect multiple apps in a single Zap? And the answer to this is yes. So Zaps in Zapier can be configured to connect one or many apps. So you can see right here, this is a very high level overview of a Zap, but you could see how a new transaction in a fundraising app like Classy could find and create a constituent in Bloomrang, create a donation in Bloomrang, add or update a subscriber in MailChimp, and add a tag to that subscriber in MailChimp related to the campaign in Classy. So we can design automations that link multiple applications together, as well as Zapier can be used to do automations that are within a single app. So for example, a Bloomerang to Bloomrang automation. An example of this would be when a new membership transaction is created in Bloomerang, update the membership custom field set on the constituents profile. Now I want to transition a little bit here to talking about some frequently asked questions we get about use cases. So we often get asked, what are the most common automations we see for Bloomerang? And this is really to get your imagination churning on what automations may be most useful for your organization. So the top four that we see are fundraising applications, email marketing, accounting, and e-commerce. Those are the four most common automations we see with Bloomrang, but we also see event registration integrations, reporting dashboards using Google Sheets, notifications via email, Slack, or another team messaging system, and online data collection forms. So forms outside of Bloomrang, but wanting to sync that data into Bloomrang. And the piggyback question on this is often, what are some of our favorite Bloomrang automations? Now, these are mine personally. The rest of my team may have other ones that they really enjoy. But for me, I love a good Bloomerang to Bloomrang automation. So these are ones where an automation is triggered based off of a certain event in Bloomrang, typically the creation of a constituent or a transaction, but really a helpful one for just streamlining those operational tasks and getting some of that time back where you may have been performing some data entry or updates manually. Dashboards in Google Sheets. We have a number of clients using these right now for a lot of different reasons. I can give a couple examples here. Using dashboards to create kind of an external visibility for opportunities you're tracking in Bloomrang on an interaction or a note, creating an opportunity pipeline, tracking tasks in Bloomrang. Again, another kind of operational dashboard here. Or even creating some external visibility for some of your fundraising goals and progress. This could be on a fund campaign or appeal level, or even on a bias solicitor level. So again, dashboards are one of my favorites. I think it just creates a great external visibility to your system, especially if you have users or stakeholders, or sorry, team members or stakeholders that are not Bloomrang users. So board members, maybe your solicitor team doesn't have access to Bloomrang, just different ways to share that information so more of your team can see the progress that's being made. Notifications. We have a few clients right now that get notified when major donations are made or donations to certain fundraising campaigns. And I think this is a really helpful automation because it is prompting you of an event occurring rather than you needing to go into the system and run a report to see if that event has occurred. So we really like these, again, for things like major gifts or gifts of a certain type. So what perhaps it's not a major gift, but it's a gift to a certain fundraising campaign or purpose, to be able to get notifications for those. And along those lines, I also love drip email campaigns. I love being able to set up an email journey in your email marketing tool and have it trigger based off of an event in Bloomrang, whether it's a transaction or a constituent being created, and carry that constituent through a series of emails, either trying to convert them to become a donor, or perhaps convert them from a one-time donor to a recurring donor. But just a great way to automate what you're doing and take your efforts and really streamline them and have those constituents carry through that journey with minimal resource required by your team. Now, while we're talking about use cases, I actually want to go back to this slide. We had talked about e-commerce here, and it looks like we had a question come through the Q&A that I think would be a good one for us to cover here. So I want to pause and jump back to it real quick. So we had a question about an organization is using WooCommerce on their website. And so information is sent to Bloomerang through Zapier, but it's not, but it's itemized. So it's not efficient. When donors make a purchase of more than 10 items, the information goes into Bloomrang through Zapier. So they want to find a solution so that information goes to Bloomrang through Zapier with a single purchase total and not splits per item purchased. That's a great question. So a way to do this would be pull up here. We're going to pull up WooCommerce. So every app in Zapier's marketplace, right now I'm on WooCommerce, and let me actually go back a step here. If you go to the zapier.com/apps, this is Zapier's directory of all of the applications that are in its marketplace. And so we can search for any apps we may be using, for example, Bloomrang, or in this case, WooCommerce, and see a profile for that app and what functionality it has. So if we scroll down to the bottom, we can see a listing of all of the triggers and actions that are supported by this application. So in this case, for this organization, it's possible that if you're seeing that a donation is being created for each item in an order, it's possible that the line item in an order trigger is what is being used. So in this case, if we wanted to create a donation in Bloomrang or a transaction in Bloomrang for the full order in WooCommerce, not for each separate line item, we would want to use the new order trigger. So we would use the trigger that's based off of the full order, not a line item, in order to create that single transaction record in Bloomrang for the full order. So each app in Zapier's marketplace has a different suite of triggers or actions, and some may have differences in granularity to support different types of use cases. So for example, if you wanted a donation in Bloomrang for each line item in an order, you could use this trigger, or maybe there's only certain line items you want to sync into Bloomrang. Or if you want to get the full order into Bloomrang, we can use the new order trigger. Transitioning a little bit from some use case questions. Oh, perfect. Thank you, Denisha. I'm happy that that response was helpful. So transitioning a little bit to some common questions we get about the Zapier platform itself. The first question we often get is, how much does Zapier cost? So Zapier's pricing is tiered based on a different allotment of tasks per month. To give you an estimate of the clients we work with, the average cost is around $20 to $75 a month. Now, this comes down to organizational size, the number of apps they're integrating, and the volume flowing between those apps. But this is about the average we see for most of our clients. Zapier does offer a 15% discount for nonprofits. So if you are going to be getting started with Zapier, or maybe you are already using Zapier, if you haven't applied for the nonprofit discount already, that is definitely something to apply for. It's a very easy process. You can upgrade and downgrade as needs change in Zapier. So the different pricing plans, I'll show those here in a minute. You can upgrade and downgrade throughout the year as you need to, and they will prorate or credit your account as needed based off of the status of your subscription. And it's important to note that the Bloomerang Zapier app is free to use. So the Bloomerang Zapier app you can use at no cost. It's the Zapier platform itself and or any other apps that you're using that may have associated costs. So if you want to look at Zapier pricing, zapier.com/pricing. And you'll see the different tiers available on Zapier. Now, you likely won't need to get up to the expert or professional plus tiers because in each of these lower plans, the starter and the professional, there are actually options. Actually, let me get out of this here. I'm logged into my Zapier, so it's showing me only certain options. Oops. So in each of these lower plans, the starter and the professional, there are drop-down menus for different task levels. So it's not a jump from $20 to $50 to $300. There are levels within here. So it's important to note if you need to upgrade or downgrade, make sure you are choosing the appropriate level based on your organization's needs and where your task volume is at. Now, if you're looking for that link to get the 15% nonprofit discount, it's right down here. I'm actually going to go ahead. I'll send this in the chat. Oh, Diana already beat me to it. So Diana's got that in the chat. If you haven't applied for the nonprofit discount already, go ahead and apply for that if you have an active Zapier account. But again, important to note, most organizations fall in the starter and professional tiers, and there are different task allotments within those different plans. Now, you might be wondering what a task is in Zapier. So a task is an action your Zap successfully completes. So what counts as a task are things like filters and actions as we proceed through our Zap. So if we have our trigger doesn't count as a task, but if we pass a filter or a path, that counts as a task, and the completion of each subsequent action is a task as well. So if we completed this full workflow, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tasks for our triggering event. Now, if an action doesn't complete successfully or a filter or path is the conditions are not met, no tasks are used. So you'll often see in a lot of either Bloomrang Academy webinars that we'll talk about the use of filters as a way to stop an automation if there are certain types of records in the triggering event that we don't want to continue in the workflow. And we do that intentionally so that no tasks are used when that triggering event occurs that we don't want to continue on. Now, as we mentioned, each plan in Zapier has a different task limit. So we often get asked, what happens if we hit our task limit in Zapier? So Zapier will provide you with an email notification when you hit 80% of your task allotment for that billing cycle. If you reach that limit, any new Zap runs get placed in a held status for 30 days. And you can replay these or push them through when whether you upgrade or just when your billing cycle or that task usage resets. So essentially Zapier queues them up and puts them in a held status so that when either your billing cycle renews or you upgrade your subscription, you can go ahead and replay those held tasks. So you don't lose the data. It sits there in Zapier waiting for you to go ahead and push it through once your task usage resets. And your task usage resets when you upgrade as well. So it drops it back down to 0 and provides that full new allotment for the upgraded plan. Now that's the end of our frequently asked questions. So we're going to transition to talking about some of the questions we got submitted through the form prior to this webinar. And there's actually one here that was submitted in the Q&A during the few slides we've been going through here. And I actually want to tackle that one first, and then we'll go through the other questions we've received. So the question we got is, we are using an event ticketing platform that has lots of custom fields relating to different events and does not record the event name, but instead a campaign ID, and pushes that to a Google Sheet. Zapier can't read formulas in Google Sheets, just value only cells. How do we use Zapier to both translate the numeric ID to the Bloomrang campaign and appeal name? And can we use Zapier to fill in data points that aren't captured by the event platform like fund name? So this is a great question. We actually did cover this in the last 201 webinar, this concept. So I'm going to cover it here, but if you want a deeper dive, definitely watch the 201 webinar. So we would typically use what we call as a lookup table. So I'm going to go ahead and create an empty sheet here. So in this case, we would have our event ID or campaign ID. And essentially what a Google Sheet lookup table allows us to do is, in Zapier, there's an action for Google Sheets called, and I'll pull that up here. There's an action in Google Sheets that's called lookup spreadsheet row. And so we can look up a spreadsheet. Once we identify the spreadsheet in the worksheet, we can look up a column based off of a value. So in this case, we'd be looking up our event ID or campaign ID column. And when it finds that match for whatever that ID number is, we can return things like the Bloomrang fund, campaign, appeal, maybe a custom field value. Campaign. So what this allows us to do is, in our automation, dynamically look up based off of that event or campaign ID that's coming through the event ticketing platform, and pull in from the Google Sheet the corresponding Bloomrang coding that we want to assign on, our create donation action. So it allows us to fill in not only data points that potentially aren't captured on the event ticketing page or aren't stored anywhere, and be able to assign that data. So we often see this for events. So any event registration platform will see this for events, pulling in these details for event orders. We also will see it for fundraising apps. So the fundraising campaign ID, using that to identify what fund, campaign, and appeal should be assigned when we create that donation in Bloomrang. So again, the 201 webinar, I know Diana put that link in the chat. We'll provide a much deeper dive on how lookup tables work. Really useful piece there. But this is something that we use in a lot of our automations, because it allows us to, again, dynamically code multiple values in Bloomrang just based off of the ID or some ID from that triggering event. One of the questions we got submitted prior to the webinar was, how do we connect Constant Contact and Bloomrang? So there's two different ways that we can sync data between Constant Contact and Bloomrang, because it can go both directions. So if we're looking at a sync from Bloomrang to Constant Contact, there are three different ways that we likely would trigger an automation. A new constituent is created, an existing constituent is updated, or a new transaction is created in Bloomrang. When these events occur, the common actions are to find or create a contact in Constant Contact, or even update a contact. Now, it's important to note that while we can get a full payload of data, both standard and custom fields coming from Bloomrang, Constant Contact does not allow us to map to custom fields in Constant Contact. We can only map to the standard fields on a contact, such as name, email, phone address, things like that. But it is still a way to seed lists in Constant Contact based off of certain events that are occurring in Bloomrang. Now we can also sync data the other direction. So we can sync data using Zapier from Constant Contact back to Bloomrang. So if we have a new contact created in Constant Contact, we can find or create our constituent in Bloomrang. But again, this should only occur when there's a first and a last name on that contact and constant contact. First and last name is a required field for searching for that Bloomerang constituent first in order to prevent duplication. And the other common workflow is that when a new email is opened, that's a triggering event that's available in constant contact. We can create an interaction or a note in Bloomerang for that constituent or in that constituent's timeline in order to create almost a log or track that engagement that constituent is having with our email communications. The next question we got is, does Zapier integrate with Gmail and place emails as interactions into Bloomerang? So yes, Gmail does have an app in Zapier. Most G Suite products, as well as Microsoft 365 products, have an app in Zapier's marketplace. The triggering events we typically would see coming from Gmail into Bloomrang are a new email in a specific mailbox, a new starred email or a new labeled email, or a new email matching a specific search criteria. Now, if you aren't familiar with it already, Bloomerang actually does have a BCC feature that we recommend as a first step, because that will automatically log your emails to that constituent's profile in Bloomerang. So we actually recommend that as a first step. It's free. It's included as part of your Bloomerang software or Bloomerang product, whereas Zapier, you would have Zapier costs for running these automations for all the emails flowing through. So if you haven't already, Bloomerang has a great help article. I'll go ahead and pull it over here. There's a great help article on Bloomerang's knowledge base about BCC to Bloomerang basics. I'll go ahead. I think Diana might be working already, but I'll see if I beat her to it and send it in the chat here. Great resource to go ahead and just view how the BCC works. And if it doesn't meet your needs, again, there are lots of ways to sync additional email data from Gmail into Bloomerang. Do you know of any platform that works well with Zapier where we can send letters via a mail house? So we do have one client right now that does this currently. They use a platform called Handwritten to send a note or a card that looks as though it was handwritten. So that is one platform we've worked with already, but there are others likely available on Zapier's marketplace. So again, if you go to zapier.com/apps, you can likely search among different tools. And again, taking you back to on this page, you can also search among different app categories or families. So things like communication apps, again, CRM and fundraising apps. So lots of different ways you can search, but if there's a specific mailhouse tool that you found, you can go ahead and search for that here. Oh, Diana, thank you for sending the BCC link. Looks like I accidentally only sent it to hosts and panelists. So thank you for sharing that to the wider group. So again, if you're looking at mailhouse tools and want to find one that you could automate with, if you find a few in the marketplace, you can just come in here and search for that app to see if it's available. How can we have donors make pledges online with a payment schedule and have it synced to Bloomerang? So the Bloomerang API, not the Zapier app, the API would require a little bit of code development, but the Bloomerang API can support creation of a pledge in Bloomerang, but there are some limitations. So it cannot be set up to be auto-processed by Bloomerang, and it can only be created with standard frequencies. So pledge payments on, or pledge installments on an annual or monthly basis, not a custom schedule. So the alternative to this is that we have seen some users explore pledge or fundraising apps that do allow for that online creation of a pledge or a commitment, and then they can explore an automation syncing the payments when they're made back to Bloomerang. So again, a little bit more custom solution on both of these options here. But there are ways, again, to collect some of that pledge data and create the pledge in Bloomrang. Again, cannot be auto-processed and can only be created with standard frequencies. Or there's always the option to pursue a pledge or fundraising app and syncing the payments into Bloomrang so that you can see that payment history and the constituents timeline in Bloomrang. After integrating PayPal with Bloomrang, can the PayPal option appear on my Bloomrang website giving form? So PayPal is not currently a payment gateway option for Bloomrang online forms. So we've seen organizations that want to provide PayPal as an option. They will create a PayPal donation button and place it at the top of the web page where their Bloomrang form is embedded. So that if the donor prefers to donate via PayPal, they can simply click that link and donate via PayPal and then have a Zapier automation sync that donation into Bloomrang, or continue to complete the embedded Bloomrang form and process that payment either through Bloomrang payments or Stripe, whichever you have connected. So it looks like we have a question here from a user about how to do the Zapier integration for PayPal. So we actually have a webinar on this, and it actually is linked in my one of my next slides here, which the next question was, when using a PayPal button with two options, how do we enter the correct fund in Bloomrang? So Jeff went ahead and sent the link in the chat for the PayPal automation webinar. So Sarah, go ahead. That link has a 60-minute webinar where we set up a PayPal integration live step by step. And so for anyone else who's interested in that, but that is one of the pieces we cover in that webinar, which is if we have multiple options or allow the donor to choose where they want to direct their funds with our PayPal donation button, how do we make sure we're entering the correct fund in Bloomrang? And again, this comes back to our lookup table that we talked about earlier. So our automating donations from PayPal to Bloomrang webinar is a great one. Zapier 201 dives more into lookup tables, but this is where that lookup table we had, instead, this would be our PayPal designation of where the donor wants their funds directed. Maybe it's where it's needed most. Program A, scholarships, whatever those look like, we can go ahead and then identify what the Bloomrang coding should be. And this may be the same across all of these, or it may be different. And so it allows us to then, in our Zap, using the Google Sheets app, look up the spreadsheet row using that PayPal designation and return the coding so that we can map that to our create donation action and make sure that it's coded with the appropriate values and fund campaign and appeal. Now, I know Jeff has been answering most of your questions in the Q&A, and there's a couple we've addressed here live. If you have any other questions that are lingering about Bloomrang automations or the Zapier platform itself, please feel free to enter them in the Q&A now. We have a bit more time here, so we can answer a couple more questions. Or Jeff, if you think there's a couple we should cover here live right now, we can go ahead and address those as well. So it looks like we got a question from Michael of whether Zapier works with Monday.com. So let's go to our Zapier.com/apps. And we can see right here, Monday.com has a Zapier app, and we can scroll down to the bottom. And yes, it does. So you can see the list of triggers and actions here that are available to set up automations with Monday.com. And Michael, I'll go ahead and send this in the chat so you can just click the link. So again, feel free to send the questions in the chat or through the Q&A. We've still got some time here, and I'm happy to answer any questions about use case or the Zapier platform. Great question, John. So John asked, I think you need a paid Zapier plan to link multiple actions like in my examples. Yes, that's correct. So the free plan in Zapier, if we go back to my Zapier pricing page. So that's why I'd indicated most organizations have a starter or professional plan. The free plan in Zapier only allows you to set up single step Zaps. So that would be something like an email notification when a transaction is made or a major donation. Anything more than that. So typically when you're syncing data from an outside app into Bloomrang or from Bloomrang to an outside app, you're going to be at a minimum in the starter plan. So most of our organizations end up in the starter plan. You might be able to get by with the free plan if you're only doing Slack or email notifications for certain activity types in Bloomrang. Perfect. Thanks, John. Yes, looks like there's a question. Can Zapier link Facebook giving and or YouTube gifts into Bloomrang? I don't believe either of those are in Zapier's marketplace right now. I believe Facebook is only, Facebook is more, it's advertising and marketing based apps. Those actions are available in Zapier. I don't know if YouTube giving is included in here either. Let's look real quick. Yeah, so the YouTube Zapier app is all related to videos, not to giving as well. So for something like Facebook giving and YouTube gifts, if you are getting a report from those platforms, there are ways to sync that data into Bloomrang from that report. So we often, for clients that are using other apps that don't want to go through the conversions necessary to prep a file for import into Bloomrang, we can set up what we call a automated Google Sheet import, where you can paste the raw data from your source application, and then Zapier performs all the necessary conversions and syncs that data into Bloomrang. So if there's a tool that you're using that doesn't have a Zapier app, but you're able to pull reports, that is always a viable opportunity as well for integration. Yes, looks like there's a question. We're using Jotforms for registration for programs. We were thinking about processing a registration fee, but Jotforms does not connect to Bloomerang payments. So yes, I believe the Bloomrang payments as a payment processor is tied to Bloomerang product. So you would likely need to connect a different payment processor to your Jotform in order to collect the registration fee. And then you could still likely connect via Zapier, either with the payment processor or with Jotform to sync that registration fee into Bloomerang. Got a couple more minutes here. Diana, are there any questions that you've gotten from your support team that you'd want us to cover here today, just for the good of the group?
Thanks, Jessie. I'm curious too. It sounds like a lot of our attendees today have already quite a bit of experience with Zapier. A lot of the questions that we get are around like troubleshooting any errors that might happen.
Yeah, that's a great question. We do get asked that quite often. I would say the most common errors are typically seen when writing data into Bloomrang. So either creating or updating records in Bloomrang. And the common errors that we see are what we would consider a validation error, meaning that there's no first and last name when trying to find or create a constituent, or it's missing one piece of contact information. Perhaps the fund campaign or appeal you're trying to assign doesn't actually exist in Bloomrang yet, or same with a custom field value. So you'll get an error message saying first and last name are required fields, or the fund you provided does not exist in Bloomrang. So it's more kind of those data validation pieces where either the data coming from your source app is incomplete, or the value that you're trying to assign doesn't exist in Bloomrang yet. And so typically you can just correct that issue of creating that new value, or manually enter the outlier, the errored record that was missing some data, and then your solution will continue working from there. But those are the most common ones we see coming for Bloomrang users, is when writing that data into Bloomrang. You may occasionally see with all Zapier apps, there's the occasional error on a trigger. It's called a trigger partner failure error. And it typically means that the API or the server had a momentary down period. Now with Zapier pulling every 1 to 5 minutes for new records, that means when Zapier pulls the next time, 1 to 5 minutes later, it will grab those new records. So those are typically not cause for concern. Most of our clients, we tell them that they can essentially disregard those errors unless they see them occurring every 1 to 5 minutes for 24 hours, which is unlikely. Usually they'll see that once in a blue moon, typically when the Bloomrang system is undergoing maintenance.
Nice, thank you, Jessie.
So if there's any interest in learning more about Bloomerang and Zapier, we do have a couple more webinars coming up later this year. So these are more use case specific. So if these use cases apply to your organization, we would love to see you attend. So we'll be covering one in October that's going to show how to set up an integration between Classy and Bloomrang. Classy is a fundraising app that we've come across with quite a few Bloomrang users. And then in December, we're going to do a webinar on Bloomrang to Bloomrang automations for membership. So how, when a membership transaction is created in your Bloomrang database, it can update membership custom fields on the constituents profile. So 2 upcoming webinars, and we are already starting to plan for next year. So in the chat, we would love to hear what Bloomrang automations or Zapier content you'd like to see in the future. So shoot a message in the chat with any ideas or use cases or topics you'd love for us to cover in a future Bloomrang Academy webinar, and we can get those in our queue. We love creating content that is relevant for you and covers the use cases that you want to see. So go ahead and enter anything in the chat that you think would be helpful for you, and we will get that in our queue for next year.
I wanted to comment here, Jessie, too, that sometimes, the questions we get are, we have customers asking, what task management platform do you integrate with? Or what other payment processing or event registration, things like that. So you can look at it. You can look at this question 2 ways. If there's already a system that you're using that you'd like to see us build a class around, let us know. Or if there's a workflow that you're interested in, if you don't have a specific software in mind, but this is something you'd want to do and you're not quite sure how to go about that, let us know as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great clarification, Diana. Perfect. Thanks, John. We'll add that to the queue to do some exploration on.
Yeah, and as we're waiting for more of those responses to come in, there is also another poll that we would like to launch. If you would like a follow-up about consulting services to help set up your integrations with Bloomrang, please let us know in the poll. And thank you again for all of your questions, for those who submitted questions prior and submitted questions today. Jessie and I always talk about it depends on what your use case is and what you are trying to do. And as much as we try to build the type of content that's going to be applicable for everyone, you all such have very unique needs that it's really wonderful hearing your specific use case.
Well, it's been a pleasure here today, Diana. I think we had some really great questions. Seems like the Q&A was pretty busy while I was talking through as well. So appreciate everyone attending today. Again, any questions, always feel free to reach out to us at Sidekick about automations. We're happy to hop on a call and talk through your use case.
Wonderful. Thank you again, everyone. Thank you so much, Jesse, for that great content today. Thank you, Jeff, for that great assist. We had a lot of great questions come in. Thank you again, everyone, for being here with us today. We hope you have a great rest of your day, and we hope to see you in another Academy class soon. Bye.